Everyone knows Tony Stewart is one of the greatest stock car drivers to ever race, and they also know his phenomenal talent on the dirt. What seems to get undervalued in terms of motorsport echelons is Tony Stewart's phenomenal racing career in open wheel. Stewart was the main benefactor of open wheel's fallout in the 90s, getting an offer from John Menard, who had a race team that he funded by his company, a home improvement chain that rivaled Home Depot, believe it or not. Menard ended up giving Tony Stewart his big chance to fulfill a dream, and that was to race in the Indy 500. And despite all the odds and all the people saying that a USAC guy couldn't do that good in open wheel compared to the new way of going through the ranks through the road course system or being a Formula One reject, Tony Stewart would prove all the naysayers in Michigan wrong by having an undervalued career in open wheel. NRF Productions proudly presents Tony Stewart, the IndyCar Years. When it comes to Tony Stewart and open wheel racing, Tony Stewart didn't just naturally gravitate towards the open wheel circuit. It was naturally in his blood. Tony Stewart was born a Hoosier. It was in his blood as he was raised in Columbus, Indiana, as if you take a 51-minute drive up north on I-65, you know where you end up, you know exactly where that road leads. Well, you guys should know because this is Indiana. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which is, of course, open wheel racing's ultimate coliseum. Tony Stewart may have gotten his start in USAC cars. In fact, he swept the Midget, Silver Crown, and the Sprints in a single season, but his heart still relied with open wheel racing. It's just too damn bad he couldn't get a seat in kart, given the fact that the addition of road courses pretty much cut off the traditional path a driver would take up the ranks. No longer did you have to work your way up blue-collar style, racing midgets and sprint cars, hoping to eventually get to the highest echelon of open wheel. Nope, that was all out the window because now the pipeline was ridden with a lot of rich Formula One drivers looking for a second chance. One man looked to change that, and that was Tony George. He brought in the ultimate juggernaut known as NASCAR to the famed super speedway, and with all the money made from tickets, from tourism and stuff like that, it led George to eventually break off and start his own racing series, the Indy Racing League. Following the traditional path of NASCAR with more American-born stars and more ovals, the series reconnected Indy racing to its core roots. This split of open-wheel racing, as acknowledged by Tony Stewart, gave him his chance to race in open-wheel race cars. The split actually created my opportunity to race in Indy cars and Indianapolis, winning those championships before they were starting to talk about the IRL and what it was designed to do. It was still such a far stretch to even imagine being able to one day have an opportunity to drive at Indy. That opportunity would be with John Menard. Yes, that John Menard that owned a massive home improvement chain that rivaled Home Depot. Yes, it was that exact same guy, and it was with that money he made off of his massive business that he had built up. Tony Stewart's first professional racing opportunity was sponsored by Menard, showcasing the Quaker State brand in Stewart's debut before switching to the Glide and Paints brand going forward. Disney would be his first career start, a race where he would lead 37 laps and finish second to Buzz Calkins. Race number 2 in the desert, Smoke's lightning-fast aluminum block engine would erupt and expire, and in the words of Stewart, she broke. Start number 3 would be the ultimate Super Bowl of open-wheel racing, the Indy 500. A race Tony Stewart watched religiously back in the day as a kid from Indiana. This was it. This was the greatest spectacle in racing, the Indianapolis 500. Back home in Indiana, he would be on the other side of the fence, not just as a starter, but on the front row after his average of 233 miles per hour put him in that position to lead the field to green. Now, he wouldn't win the pole. That would ultimately be teammate Scott Brayton, but because of a tragic accident where he was killed in practice, Tony Stewart would resume the pole for his first ever Indianapolis 500. And in many ways, Tony Stewart was set to usher in this new era for the Indy 500, even taking a swing at the other open-wheel race going on 3 hours north in Brooklyn, Michigan. If you want to go by a name, go to Michigan and watch the race. If you want to watch race car drivers, come to Indianapolis and watch real race car drivers. Despite backlash from some of kart's superstars, Tony Stewart proved that homegrown talent could rise through the USAC ranks and be competitive in Indy. Team Menard dominated the first part of the race, leading Stewart to set a rookie record by leading the first 31 laps of the race. He was heavily favored to win, though the team would experience boost pressure problems regarding the engine's turbocharger pop-up valve. The ABC broadcast picked up that the engine sounded sour, and you know that did not bode well.
Yes, as he went by me down here, there's the smoke coming out pretty bad. He went by here, he had a cylinder not running on the 6-cylinder engine, only had 5 cylinders. That's doomsday. Tony Stewart will be out.
Leading to the end of Tony Stewart's first Indy 500. As though his Indy 500 chances ended in heartbreak, it was a massive heartbreak from a guy that grew up just 51 miles south of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He won Rookie of the Race and proved to all those naysayers in Michigan that the IRL field was stacked full of talent. Inexperienced drivers, huh? Yeah, it says a lot when the so-called best of the best couldn't even take the green flag without crashing. Good job, Cart. Good job.
The field, perhaps the most qualified in IndyCar history.
Are you sure about that?
For Tony Stewart in that race, he proved he could be competitive, but when it came to winning, Lady Luck chastised Tony Stewart from the ultimate taste of victory lane in the IRL. At New Hampshire, he had left the entire field twice, only for electrical issues to be the unraveling and cause him to lose that race. Disney, more issues with the car, saw Stewart's hopes head down south to Miami. Texas, you know the thing would happen. Stewart would dominate, but it was that pesky engine that just could not keep it together for 3 freaking laps. As an IRL fan, you just figured that Tony Stewart just had to be released from this constant pain, though he would get a top 5 in the Indy 500 in 1997, but he still needed that ultimate victory. He was hoping that Pikes Peak would be the place to finally reach the top of the mountain. Team Menard was going all in on the number 2 team after the Robbie Buell team withdrew after crashing in practice. That effort would lead into an absolute masterclass by Tony Stewart, one of his better races in the IRL, leading 193 of the 200 laps. Though of course Lady Luck would bring about a green-white checker just to ramp up the pressure a bit and bunch up that IRL field. The snake-bitten driver, this USAC phenom, would ultimately prove that, hey, you don't need to be a high-class Formula 1 reject to win open-wheel races. I am going to get this job done.
Jinx may be off of Stewart's shoulder. And Tony Stewart finally gets it done, the 8th different winner in 10 IRL events.
So Tony Stewart was officially a winner in the Indy Racing League and solidified himself as a contender for the season championship, as one race later in Charlotte, Stewart would take over the season points lead with a 7th place finish, leading into the championship race for the Indy cars in Las Vegas. No, it wasn't that race. We were still many years away from IndyCar's fixation into thinking that they could create Talladega-style racing, which turned out to be an outright black eye for the motorsport. In this championship fight, all Tony Stewart needed to do was finish in the 8th position or better. His foe, self-proclaimed 11-time champion Davey Hamilton, who was trying to pull a Daniel Hemrick by going 2 for 1 with his first win and first championship in the same race. This was also a home race for Hamilton. He was going to have the crowd rallied around him. Okay, maybe not so much the crowd, but still, it was going to be a damn good party if he could pull this off, as he grew up just 5 miles away from the racetrack. Without question, Davey Hamilton was going to do everything in his power to go for broke and make up that deficit on the Menard number 2. Tony Stewart, meanwhile, attacked this race in a more conservative approach. The team struggled throughout the race to find grip and made a few wing adjustments throughout the night on top of one of the single worst pit crew performances in a championship situation, thanks to various air jack problems. The next time I hear someone complain about Bubba Wallace's pit crew, I'm just going to point to this race. Still, the Menard number 2 kept it clean in a wild race that saw cars have suspension issues, cars get into wrecks. Heck, Robert Guerrero thought he was going to the Nellis Air Base considering how he flew through the air in his violent crash late in that race. This would give the DNF Pro Menard team a safety net, and with Davey Hamilton's less than stellar night, all it took was a clean race to complete the 1997 campaign on top.
While Tony Stewart takes the championship, they've got to be celebrating down in the Menard pits as well with Tony Stewart as the champion.
With one of the least clutch pit crew performances in a championship situation, Tony Stewart capped off a season with 5 DNFs in 10 races by clinching the title from 11th place 4 laps down. And I know a lot of people are going to say this championship was Mickey Mouse due to the fact that the split and everything around that, but there was still a lot of talent in the NASCAR thinking IRL. You had rock solid Eddie Cheever, the Indy 500 champion that year Arie Luyendyk, And of course, the purple people eater Buddy Lazier, who would later devour the competition in 2000 to become an IndyCar champion himself. Tony Stewart beat all these guys to prove at a young age that he could potentially be the next open-wheel superstar in America. And if any of those high-class elite racers in kart had any doubts, Tony Stewart's development and rise in the IRL proved them all wrong in every sense, except for the fact that he wasn't a road ace, considering that they did not have road courses in the IRL, though Tony Stewart would have plenty of time to clap back later in his career in a different form of racing. So how would Tony Stewart celebrate this monumental achievement? Why, by going to Disney World like many champions have went to celebrate. Only his form of fun was a bit different than the likes of Phil Simms, choosing to completely dominate the first race of the 1998 IRL season and win his second career race. Though he entered as the guy everyone was chasing, the 1998 Indy 500 would swing the pendulum in the IRL. Tony Stewart had a car capable of winning this race before yet again, guess what, engine issues would end his bid at drinking the milk, wearing the decorative wreath around his neck, and kissing the yard of bricks. On the flip side, this was the race that would propel Kenny Brock as the guy to beat in this season, and ultimately he would not be matched by Tony Stewart and Team Menard. Tony Stewart's reign as IRL champion would end with more wins and podiums than his championship season, but it was the average finish that really nailed this team in. Unable to replicate an average finish inside the top 10, he ended the season a disappointing third in points, which would prove to be Tony Stewart's final run at the IndyCar Championship. Despite Tony George's hopes that the Indy Racing League would produce a long-term grassroots superstar, Tony Stewart would be out the door for 1999. As much like another Indiana kid that actually dreamed hard of becoming an IndyCar star, Stewart would move to NASCAR and drive for Joe Gibbs Racing beginning with the 1999 season. George, in his reflection many years later, reiterated his wish for Tony Stewart to stay put in the IRL rather than chase the money and the fame in motorsport's most popular form of racing at the time. It was great that Menard gave him an opportunity. It would have been nice if that turned into an opportunity that would have kept him in Indy cars longer so we could all have had more to reflect on. He was good in the league, and it would have been nice to feel like he really could have accomplished his goals in racing by staying put. That wasn't all for Tony Stewart in open wheel, as in 1999 for TriStar Motorsports and 2001 for Chip Ganassi, he would qualify and race in the Indy 500, scoring 2 top 10s, but not the big win. That to this date is the final chapter on Tony Stewart's IndyCar career, as he was a driver that rose to the occasion in open wheel and was the first big superstar in the IRL era. Yes, I'm going to hear it in the comments, the debate about the skeptics, because, Team Penske and Ganassi, they were up there in kart. He didn't have all the big dogs to race against, and perhaps you guys have a point there, as Tony Stewart, maybe if he had those guys, he would have been maybe 10th to 15th in points, but still in many ways, there were a lot of great drivers in the IRL. It was a diverse field, one that had a lot of skill, and for Tony Stewart to come in with this competitive field and start winning races and championships immediately, that was a huge accomplishment in its own. It's just one of the things that made Tony Stewart a true jack of all trades in the racing world, is he would have many, many other racing accomplishments, not only in the NASCAR circuit, how we all know him, but in other facets of motorsport that makes him one of the greatest drivers to ever get behind the wheel. So anyways, this is Nathan for NRF Productions signing out, and just remember, guys and gals, life's a beach and then you drive.